What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions of the Lamplighters League just a little bit after I checked out the demo over the weekend, as the game is launching today, but Paradox Interactive sent me over a review key yesterday, which obviously wasn't quite enough time to review the game ahead of its embargo, which was last week. So while the full review will probably be done by like Friday or Saturday, judging by what I've already played, I can now bring you my first impressions on launch day here. For those who don't know, the Lamplighters League is a TRPG from Harebrained Schemes, the people behind the Shadowrun trilogy, but this one is set in an alternative 1930s history that sees occult elements trying to take over the world. Specifically, we're going to be fighting 3 separate courts of ne'er-do-wells that collectively make up the Banished Court. People trying to seize a power that will effectively allow them to remake the world in their own image. Naturally, would like to stop that, but things are a little complicated by the fact that the best of the best are kind of already dead and gone. So we're left with the best of the worst, as they like to put it, which sees us recruiting agents trying to fight off these threats in classic TRPG manner. So I mostly want to focus on the stuff that wasn't in the demo, which was everything past the first couple of missions, but the first 5 or so missions serve as a sort of introduction where you're not really up against a clock or anything. It's kind of just explaining the basics of the game to you. Essentially, that in order to stop the Banished Court, we have to reduce their Doomsday Clock progress by successfully completing missions that hinder their progress. But this is somewhat offset by our need to both recruit agents as well as allies, and complete various side missions to gain the resources necessary to stop these people. And given that there are 3 separate Doomsday counters to deal with, that can be a fair bit of things to juggle. So in addition to dealing with the missions that specifically hinder these people's progress, there are also search missions. Basically, the agents that we are not actively using on a mission can be put to work, so to speak, digging up information, finding new recruits, or just generating supplies. So those are small little side missions you don't have to directly do, but lead to necessary information. Recruiting agents is pretty simple. We start out with 3 of them. We'll gain a couple more through the early required missions, though you do have a few choices there, though there are ultimately 10 agents total. You don't have to recruit all of them. In fact, one of them is behind a deluxe edition paywall, which I'm definitely not a fan of, as I mentioned earlier in my previous video. But for the agents, you basically just complete a recruitment mission to get them on your side. However, that prevents you from reducing the threat from one of the houses that week. In addition to the agents, however, we also have a few allies we need to recruit. These are the weaponsmith, the healer, and the cartomancer, which has to deal with a separate progression thing. But basically, the allies provide us 3 trees that will allow us to upgrade either our equipment, gain a bunch of passives that will help us out all around, and then the third one allows us to boost our undrawn hand mechanic. So rescuing the allies is a big part of progression, as you might imagine. But the individual agents, however, also have skill trees that can be upgraded. With every successful mission, we will earn skill points that can be spent across all of our agents on their various skill upgrades. There's quite a few of these per agent, and they're pretty substantial. So I was happy to see that these skill point upgrades do provide a significant boost to your combat effectiveness. However, it doesn't end there. Like many TRPGs, there is equipment we can get our hands on. Many of the allies' passives and things will open up armor and consumables to be bought by the supplier. Supplies are a resource we also gain from completing missions or simply by collecting it during missions, which is a way we can buy things like armor, weapon mods, and accessories to kit out our agents and make them that much more effective. And so far, that's all pretty par for the course as far as TRPGs go. I would say thus far, the main unique mechanic, so to speak, for this game is the undrawn hand. After each successful mission we run, the agents that were on that mission will draw a bunch of random cards from a deck, almost kind of like tarot cards. Each of these cards has an effect that will then be assigned to those agents as you see fit. You can also discard these cards, which will then give you ink as a resource, which presumably gives you more cards later, but I haven't seen much to do with that just yet. But these cards have all sorts of benefits and can drastically alter the way a particular character plays. They can also just give you you abilities outright that you wouldn't get otherwise that can also be quite strong. These cards can be upgraded as well, and it's an interesting mechanic, I would say. I haven't messed around with it too terribly much. I'm still somewhat early game. I just made it out of the first act, essentially. So over the course of the game, we'll see how that one pans out. But in terms of what our broader goals are for this game, while these doomsday clocks are ticking towards completion, we need to accomplish a set of objectives, which effectively involves robbing these people of their source of power, which is where some of the more interesting missions take place. These are called heists. You have to complete all of them before the game will let you move on to the end game, which involves gathering information from search operations and then preparing for the heist. You don't have to do the preparation part in most instances. However, you can make the heist a little bit easier by doing the prep missions, which effectively reduce enemy counts and just make things generally easier on the heist mission itself, which is an interesting approach to that kind of thing. These prep missions also seem to grant you somewhat unique rewards as well, I guess, to further incentivize you to actually do them. And these heist missions tend to be quite a bit longer than the standard missions, which are relatively short. But moving on from there a little bit, talking about the mission variety and a little bit about combat, individual missions seem to largely come down to simply destroying something in particular, killing a particular enemy, such as an assassination, robbing a supply cache, things like that. So there's a little bit of variety there, and many times the goal, if you will, is not to actually kill everyone, but rather do a specific thing. And that's where I think the infiltration part of this game really shines. For those who are unaware, outside of the actual combat phases, you are in real time, so to speak, though you can enter turn-based when you want to. And you can use this real-time mode to take down various enemies and use the different types of agents to perform specific tasks with their own unique takedowns and environmental actions, such as saboteurs being able to pick locks, bruisers being able to break down walls, etc. So before you actually jump into combat, you can shape that battlefield a little bit by taking out enemies and setting yourself up for success. And so far, I've enjoyed that part of the game more than just about anything else. In fact, it reminds me of Miasma Chronicles, which does a similar thing, that infiltration phase before the combat. However, whereas that game, and the other games from that developer, as a matter of fact, tend to feel a little bit more like a puzzle where there's a correct approach in many cases, this game feels a little more like it's open to letting you approach those situations how you want to, and there's not necessarily a correct answer all the time, which feels like a much better implementation of that system. And it's that infiltration system combined with the, I would almost say, run-of-the-mill TRPG turn-based combat that makes the gameplay loop pretty satisfying, because then once you enter combat, you can use your beefed-up agents to just kind of clean house. In combat, each agent does genuinely feel distinct and unique. They each have a signature ability, a passive they use, a particular weapon they use, and while you can upgrade these things like their signature ability can only be used once per run. However, you can find nodes around some missions that will sort of refresh this and allow you to do it again, which can lend itself to a feeling of sort of dismantling the enemy from a combat perspective before jumping into the actual turn-based part, and I like that quite a bit. The turn-based combat is, again, just very run-of-the-mill TRPG stuff. If you've played these games, you know what to expect. 2 action point system. You can move with those action points, move with one and then act with the other, take 2 actions to attack enemies, and each individual character has a lot of variety to what they can do, especially when you start upgrading them. But for me, the most enjoyment definitely comes from managing the infiltration part, really wearing enemies down before I ever engage in combat, and then entering combat and kind of just wiping the floor with them, because that gameplay loop works a lot better than other games I've seen try to do the same thing. I think the Lamplighters League actually nails that aspect in particular, which is fun. However, to leave off this impressions video with, I still have some reservations about the game. As I mentioned in my previous video, it's a little expensive if you're looking to buy it outright, though it is available on Game Pass, which honestly I imagine is where most people are going to play this, because the base price for the game on Steam is expensive. It's $50. And this is a genre that normally runs like the $30-$40 range. Plus, as I mentioned, there is a character behind a deluxe edition of the game, which I'm just purely not a fan of, especially day one out of the gate like that. And if you want that character, it's going to cost you like $60. And for that price, again, you'd just be better off playing this on Game Pass, in my opinion. Even looking beyond those things, however, I did have a few crashes. Some of the aspects of the game run a little choppy. The recon mode in particular, which allows you to inspect enemies and look around you, seems to really stutter and slow the game down for some reason, and I'm running a 4090, and this game is not using a 4090's resources. So I am experiencing a few bugs here and there. In one egregious instance, an enemy, when combat started, ducked behind a wall and then just kind of fell off the map. And while combat eventually recognized that that enemy was gone and just kind of deleted them or something, it was a very odd experience. So there have been a few technical issues, but all of that together, first impressions wise, my thoughts are generally this as I move to review this title. This is a good, solid TRPG that would probably be a fantastic place for beginners to start, as there are difficulty modes I haven't got into, but the base difficulty is pretty easy. However, it doesn't really move the needle much. Almost every system at play here is something other TRPGs do, and that combined with the character behind a paywall and some technical issues, I really have a hard time justifying paying full price for this. And while Game Pass certainly alleviates a lot of that, it's still on my mind personally. In spite of that though, I really enjoy the art style and the setting in general. I really like the occult 1930s vibe it has going on, and its ability to successfully blend the real-time infiltration with the turn-based combat I think also has a lot going for it. So as I play through the rest of the game, this is kind of what I've got on my mind, but I want to see if the late game throws any curveballs at me before I really make any hard opinions, as there is actually a decent amount to the game I haven't mentioned in this video. But that's where I'm at right now, so I certainly hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking forward to the review, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, stick around. It shouldn't take me long. I will almost certainly have this done by the weekend, barring anything dramatic happening. In the meantime, though, let me know down below what you think about this game. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.